Mira Pereg, shown simultaneously at the Israeli Museum in Jerusalem, as well as at the Rose Art Museum at Brandeis University. So vastly, contexts that are not the same at all. The second exhibition she will be speaking about is the Frida Kahlo exhibition, which is moving from Frida Kahlo's home in Mexico and going to the Victoria and Albert Museum in London next year. So those contexts, again, are vastly not the same. Devi Noor, who is my co-conspirator in this talk, is the curatorial assistant at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, LACMA, in LA. And we actually got to meet in LA during the PSD LA, and she was very much immersed in that at the time. She will be sharing LACMA's role in LA, including the partnerships between large-scale, small-scale spaces, and also be looking at the impact of what this kind of citywide PSD spread, actually how it affects the spaces that are involved. And if we have time, I don't know how long it is going to take for all of us to get through this, we will be looking at another citywide exhibition that happened in Montreal that she was able to attend shortly after PST, and give us a bit of insight into that, or actually before PST. We will also be monitoring anything you have to ask, and so to all of us who are watching this, please feel free to type in any asks you have as we go along, because we will be leaving about 10 to 15 minutes at the end, so that our experts can answer anything you might want to know. But we will also try and insert some of those as we go along if we feel like they are relevant to our conversation. So please don't forget, type those in and ask us as we go along. So you definitely didn't log on to hear from me. I'm going to turn our first question over to Juan. Juan, the Rebel Family Collection has traveled 16 exhibition in 6 years, which is an absolutely huge amount. And I know that you have 4 shows that are going to be moving around in 2018, and another 2 scheduled for 2019. All of these exhibitions have been originated at the Rebels, and which, relative to a lot of other spaces, is considered quite small. Can you speak a little bit about how the Rebels came to this program and the reason for so many shows that have moved around the world?
Sure, thanks, Claire. Thanks for having me. So it really started, over 30 years ago, when Don and Mira Rebel's son, Jason Rebel, began traveling an exhibition of his work while he was still in college at Duke University, and it went to university galleries around the country, and they really enjoyed sharing their collection with different locales. And so we began on a smaller scale about 15 years ago, and since then it's grown, and we presented exhibitions here and then traveled elsewhere. And if you don't mind, Claire, I have a PDF I can show with some overview about us in case people aren't familiar with what we do. I can pull that up now, and it'll have some information here. So if you could just, yeah, so could I be made presenter so I can show this screen, please?
I'm actually seeing the screen, Juan, I think.
Oh, good, you can see our screen? Great. Are you seeing this PDF, Claire?
Yes, I am. I think it's online. All good.
Great, okay, good. So this is our foundation building, which we've been in since '92. These are the family I work for. I wanted to write the word lunatics over this, but our designer refused. But they're just completely crazed with art and their enterprise of engaging with artists, meeting, working with students, etc. This is a great group of students we had for a recent exhibition. This is our space. It's 2 floors: research library, bookshop, sculpture garden. We store all of our works on site and nearby. Early works acquired these works were acquired the year they were made, so it's been really interesting to just stay with some of these artists if we can, and continuously pull into new artists, be it old or young. This is some collaborations we've done with artists in recent years. Kari Up's in there, Sterling Ruby Pryor, Oscar Murillo here, 2014. So we commission them on a very, we give them carte blanche and they make works, and this is Richard Jackson. So many emerging and undiscovered artists are in their 70s and 80s.
Juan, sorry, I'm going to just jump in there. Could you put your PDF in the center of the screen? Sorry, we're just having a little bit of trouble seeing it, so you're going to have to center it for us.
So in my view, it is in the center. I'm not sure how else. I have it on full screen.
You do.
Enter. Okay. How about, yeah. Yeah, sorry. I mean, it's showing up as mine. Can you see it at all here?
I can see it, but it's actually not flicking through any of the images. So I think if you can maybe pull it up a little bit and maybe scroll through it.
Yeah. No, I'm looking at it as full screen on my sorry, let me see, show main screen. Well, we can skip the images.
Go ahead. So sorry to interrupt. You were saying Sterling Ruby.
So Claire, the image you see now is Kahinda Wiley painting with students?
No, it's Alison Zuckerman, and she's
yeah, okay.
Walk on the floor. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, that's not what I'm looking at right now. Okay, let's skip the visuals then. Unfortunately, it's not syncing up. But back to traveling exhibitions. So the North Carolina Museum of Art approached us in 2009 about taking a big exhibition of contemporary African American artists that we traveled, called 30 Americans, that we presented in Miami. And since then, it's gone on, and we've just been very fortunate. Other institutions, the National Museum of Women in the Arts, just presented an exhibition of women artists from the collection. Yeah, I mean, it's just Cincinnati Art Museum we had a great presentation with recently, just a lot of different institutions. Yeah, I'm sorry, and so back to your question about that, how it began, it was really organic and just building trust with these institutions.
Okay, thanks, Juan. So can you just explain to us a little bit more about how many exhibitions have traveled as well? I think it's really interesting because comparatively, the Rebels are quite a small space compared to a lot of museums that actually, have so many shows. Can you just give us a little bit, kind of a brief outline as to kind of how many shows you guys send around the world, how this, how that came about, and do you intend to keep doing that for a long time?
Yeah, I mean, it really just, it gives us tremendous pleasure because we have an audience here in Miami, which we're fortunate, and the space here is significant. I mean, it's just over 30,000 square feet of exhibition space, but reaching these new audiences and contexts and museums has just been transformative for us. So it's really what drives us to create exhibitions here that look at perhaps overlooked bodies of work or marginalized artists, championing them here, and then other institutions taking them. It's just what we choose to do, and really we're fortunate to work with so many of these institutions. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we hope to expand it. I mean, for a year is fantastic. Yeah, perhaps overseas. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Juan. I appreciate it. So continuing on the theme of exhibitions, however, this time going from moving between vastly, very vast context. Gannit, the first institutional collaboration you were speaking about today was an exhibition of work by Israeli video artist Nira Pereg that was shown in Jerusalem and then also referenced the Jerusalem Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The exhibition was simultaneously also on view at the Rose Art Museum and required obviously a very different handling of the show, which I think we had spoken about, included text, a variety of programs, and then obviously putting the show on in a way that was had to explain the context. Can you give us a brief overview of the importance of the exhibition context with a specific show, and also how you address kind of re-curating the show for the rows?
Yeah, so I'm going to try my luck with the PowerPoint presentation. I don't know if you can see it.
And we can see your screen.
Can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can.
All right. So as you said, Nira Pereg is an Israeli artist, a video artist, who actually studied in New York, but her practice was part of a research-based project that the former director of the Rose Art Museum, Christopher Bedford, and I took on in collaboration with the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. So a small university museum in Massachusetts and a big encyclopedic museum in Jerusalem. But we were very interested in Israeli art, video art specifically. And we came upon Nira Pereg and decided to simultaneously show her latest work, which is called The Right to Clean, and produced a joint catalog, had concurrent exhibitions, but as you said, very, very, very different exhibitions. Because we were working with a living artist, she took part in the installation process. And I think one of the things, and let me try to move this. All right. So basically, the theme is the Holy Sepulchre, and it's a continuation of Nira Pereg's investigation into borders and boundaries and kind of mundane rituals that are practiced in the Holy Land by the three monotheistic religions. And The Right to Clean relates to the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, which is the site of Christ's crucifixion, according to Christian belief. Also Golgotha, where the first man, Adam, is buried, and where Christ rose, resurrected. So it's one of the holiest places for Christians, but it's governed by about 15 different Christian denominations that frankly don't get along with each other. So what Nira Pereg did after over 5 years of working on this show is she produced a work that follows the an Orthodox Romanian nun in one video called Border, which you see now. It's less than a minute, and you see the nun just showing the sometimes imperceptible boundaries between the different denominations. The second part is something that no one gets to see, and that's the church at night with the same nun whom she calls Claire. That's not her real name, but she was thinking of Saint Claire. You see her here on the left, cleaning the Holy Sepulchre. Here she almost, you see her here, she almost looks like the icon of the Madonna, cleaning every part of the Holy Sepulchre. And the part that you see here, and you see the main doors to the church in the background, they're closed because this is nighttime when there are no visitors. And the artist received permission after being part of the, almost part of the crew there. We see her cleaning a specific place that's called the Stone of Unction, where according to Christian belief, that's where the body of Christ lay and was purified after he descended from the cross. So you see her on the left, you know, kissing the Stone of Unction. This for her is an act of devotion, and then cleaning it. So the cleaning and the ritual of cleaning, which is a quotidian thing we all do in our homes, well, hopefully, but also an act of faith. And the other piece called Surface actually shows the rituals enacted on the surface of this Stone of Unction during the day. Now, at that in Jerusalem, the locale was an Ottoman building called Beit Ticho. It was curated by Timna Zeligman, my colleague, and people could go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. I mean, it's about 10 minutes away. Also, the venue had several different rooms where dome ceilings sort of echoed the architecture of the Dome of the Rock. At the Rose Art Museum, we had one room where we installed each one of, there are actually 4 works. There's another one called Francis that I, just for lack of time, I didn't show. And what we did is, and this is not the way it was lit originally, I sort of wanted you to see the room. When people came in, it was pitch darkness, and we had to kind of recreate architecture. You see, we could focus on 2 things that were not apparent in the original show. One of them was the medium, where we showed the kind of hybrid quality of video art. On the right, what surface was very, very large, and it related to documentary film. Surface, we showed on the bottom, and it was like, almost like architecture. It was almost like a step. What you see in the background is a sculptural-like work. And on the right, we showed Claire cleaning. Here you see it even better. We showed it almost like a triptych. It was leaning against the wall, and there was it was like 3 different panels. So we played with the sizes, with the correspondence of the of video art to other art forms, and the other thing is that the videos are synchronized, but they're of different lengths. But every 7 minutes, there's sort of an interruption where there's the same video on all of them, less than a minute long, a kind of interruption. Now, in the in Jerusalem, because the videos were shown in a different room, people did not notice that. When we had all of them kind of reconstruct the maze-like architecture of the Holy Sepulchre and the interruption all of a sudden, it was very, very noticeable. So certain aspects that we didn't have, I mean, we couldn't, people couldn't access the original site and compare it. They weren't in Jerusalem. But the other aspect was that we could stress the video, and we could stress some of the other aspects. Now, to your question, what we did, this is the entrance where we showed another video by Nira Pereg. I can, if someone wants to ask me about it, I can answer. And this is the entrance to the Rose video room, which was like a big black space, but people could not see anything except for the works themselves. You can see we have, in addition to the catalog that was for sale and the wall texts, we had brochures that were free, and this is the layout of the brochure, the catalog with essays and an interview with the artist. We had a special class because it was on for almost 4 months, 3.5 months, coinciding with Brandeis' fall term, the semester. We had an entire course built around breaking boundaries in contemporary Israeli art, and the artist came as a visiting artist. We had special other events, public programs, etc. But the other thing that was very important to me, is that we could actually have an educational display of the artist's entire oeuvre in another part of campus. So it was an educational compilation that she allowed us to show, where we could I don't know if you can see it. This is a work by the artist related to barriers within the Jewish community. This is, sorry for the fast forward, a work she did in Hebron, in the church, in the relationships between Muslims and Christians, and then another work that we had. So I think that we were at a disadvantage that our audience was not in Jerusalem, obviously, but then we transformed it into a recurated exhibition that could provide the context through other means. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you so much. That was great. So I think it's kind of fascinating to look as well how you used her work, specifically video work as well, to kind of recreate the space in many ways. So thank you so much for that. And it does raise kind of really interesting ideas around how one can recurate shows. And Juan, I'm going to come back to you on that theme of recurating shows, because you mentioned in our conversation before that before this talk that many exhibitions that you have comprise a very large number of works. For example, you mentioned that you know, one show has almost 450 works to choose from, and your Leipzig painting show has more than 500. And so that when you actually you know, loan these shows to another space, they have the opportunity to really kind of recurate the spaces, sorry, the shows for their space. So I want to know from you, how has this kind of flexibility in recurating the show according to the venue, how does that inform the show as a whole? How does this maintain or honor the concept of the show? And also, how do those who are part of the show feel about kind of being recurated in the show and possibly excluded from the show as well? And then I also have a question from somebody that I think I'd like to tack on to the end of this, if you don't mind. We would like to also know if these shows make money for the Rebel space as well. And so how do you address all of that? So that was a very big, quick question. So if you need me to come back to any parts of that, please.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer these. Sure. So, well, I can start with the last question first. So yeah, we operate as a 501c3 contemporary arts foundation. And so the borrowing institution covers the cost just like they would with any exhibition that they borrow. And there's a nominal exhibition fee, which is significantly less than most large scale exhibitions, or almost all large scale exhibitions. And so we also ask them to cover curating costs, transportation, my collection manager traveling to oversee the installation and deinstallation of the show. So it's, yeah, there is, I can't really say revenue because it's so nominal, but we do try to cover the costs. And regarding the recuration, so for example, when we presented 30 Americans here, we had just under 30,000 square feet given over to that exhibition, and each artist was given their own room for the most part. And we don't like to present menageries if possible with different artists with different concerns in a room. We try to give a strong focus to individual artists because a lot of times these artists aren't that well known, and we like to give visitors a full introduction to their work. So, you know, we would present 6, 7 works, whether it was Glenn Ligon or Micheline Thomas. But then for other institutions that are working with 5,000 or 6,000 square feet, it's simply not practical to do that. And so we entrust them with knowing their audience, knowing the space, knowing the history of what they've shown, what they haven't shown. Perhaps, for example, Robert Colescott, several institutions that we've worked with have had great Colescott works that they'll add and sort of complement our holdings, which are very extensive of Robert Colescott. So we like to empower these institutions and let them craft and curate the exhibition as they see fit from these holdings. We don't like to impose what we did here on other museums because every institution is very different. You know, they have a different history of past exhibitions that they might want to tie into depending on the work they show, be it figurative or appropriation based. So yeah, it's quite open.
So
but we really, sorry, please.
No, please.
No, we really enjoy the collaboration aspect of that, whereby they look at these 400 or 500 works and say, we have room for 60 of them, 70 of them, because many are large scale, and they'll borrow those exhibitions. They'll craft them that way.
Yeah, and if I recall in our conversation, you also mentioned your shows.
Yeah, it has. Well, they've added from our acquisition. So we're constantly acquiring new works. So for Rashid Johnson, for example, when we first presented, it was 6 works, and now there might be 30 works. So they can select different works from that. And as other artists that we feel could be part of these bodies of work, and these other artists that could complement these exhibitions, we'll let these exhibitors and collaborators know about it, and they'll say, oh, well, we'd like to include, for example, this young artist, Cy Gavin, who's very much looking at Kerry James Marshall and others, sort of his senior artists that he's referencing. And so they'll pull somebody like Cy and present his work. So no, we love it, and we just, it's worked really well for us.
Great, thank you so much, Juan. So finally going to turn it over to my co-conspirator for the talk. This year, LACMA hosted a total of 5 exhibitions for PST LA, which is for a museum space, a huge amount of shows for one single citywide program. So can you give us an overview of LACMA's involvement, how PST LA evolved throughout the city space, and what was the kind of impact it had, both at LACMA and elsewhere?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Just a quick heads up to the audience. Please keep sending in your questions. We are keeping track of them. It just takes a little bit of a delay, so just want to keep in mind. Yeah, the Getty initially started, well, the large city type of citywide initiative started about 2011 to 2012. And they focused on art in from 1945 to about 1980 art in Los Angeles. They've also done a smaller scale one on architecture a few years later. And so now this year's initiative is based on the success of the previous ones. We have over 70 exhibitions, and it really explores the dialogue between Latin American art and Latinx art and artists, and with its connection with Los Angeles. There are over 70 exhibitions. I'm going through this booklet, 70 exhibitions, and it spreads as far north as Santa Barbara. It goes as far east as Riverside, Inland Empire, the Palm Springs, and as south to Orange County and down to almost to the border in San Diego. This is a major investment on the Getty's part. They have awarded over $16 million in grants for the research and implementation of of all the exhibitions. And as LACMA's part, we have 5 exhibitions that we've presented for this initiative. And also, because of the breadth and of the 70 exhibitions, they've kind of divided it into topics. So there's exploring identity, prehistoric to colonial period, there's art and activism, design, critiquing globalism and modernism, music and film, and more. It's a pretty great initiative.
Cool. Devi, does LACMA actually have a curator that specifically deals with art from the Latin world, or no? The Latin American component? Yes,
so we are all involved in departments. Of the 5, we have contemporary artists that are working, our contemporary curators of the shows. There is Home, So Different, So Appealing. That was with a Rita Gonzalez, a curator of contemporary art, along with Chan Noriega, who's in UCLA, who's working on, I think, film studies, and also with Pilar Tompkins Rivas. Carlos Alvarez was actually done, he's a Chicano artist in the 90s that we focused on, and that was done by one of our curator emeritus, Howard Fox. We have a show that's coming up next month, Found in Painted in Mexico, and that's with our Latin American department with Ilona Katsu. And then we also have Found in Translation, with our decorative arts department that really focuses on the collaboration and connections between design in Mexico and Los Angeles. And that was with Wendy Kaplan and Stacy Steinberger.
Okay, great, thank you. Can we also talk a little bit about the exhibition, A Universal History of Infamy as well? Because I think that was quite a specific exhibition where LACMA actually partnered with a lot of smaller scale spaces. So what were the challenges that you experienced working with diverse scale spaces for this specific show? And can you give us a sense of the impact that LA had on some of the smaller scale spaces, and how this actually kind of worked as an equal partnership? Because from what I got, the impression is that the foundation was sponsoring a lot of larger shows, but we'd love to get a sense of how it actually, came through to a lot of the smaller spaces too.
Of course, I'd be happy to. So A Universal History of Infamy, which is the 5th show, is the one I kind of want to use as the case study for the purpose of this webinar. It started with the contemporary art curators here at LACMA. It's Rita Gonzalez, Jose Luis Blondet, and then Pilar Tompkins Ribas, who is actually now at the Vincent Price Museum in East LA College. It initiated there with, it's basically dealing with 3 institutions. So we have LACMA, which is the Encyclopedic Museum. We also have the 18th Street Art Center, which is an art space, a smaller art space, and also does art residency programs in Santa Monica. And then we also have the Charles White Elementary School in the Los Angeles Unified School District. It is adjacent to downtown, and basically it does K through 5. So the purpose of Universal History of Infamy, it's focusing on 16 artists who are doing a residency here in Los Angeles, and then they bring their work presented at on the LACMA campus. Some have decided to use kind of the actual campus itself. They're using the facade on the screens that you'll see on Wilshire Boulevard. They've actually used art in the collections. I'm in the American Art Department, and we had lent one of our Child Hassan paintings to an artist who was working on context with dealing with Brazil. And so all of these artists, it's kind of like a loose theme, but they're really working on disparities of context. So in terms of various like methodology, literature, presentation, art, music. So as part of the Charles White Elementary, the curators have also invited one of the artists, Vincent Ramos, to actually curate a show for the students and for the public. And his was inspired by the show that he's working on is inspired by one of the protests that happened during the presidential election, the recent presidential election, and talking about a discourse of immigration. He wanted to allow to have space. 92% of the students in the Charles White Elementary are Latinx students. And he wanted to provide a space where they could talk and really discuss the topics of what's going on right now.
Great, thank you so much. I just had one follow-up to that. I was kind of curious to know, is LACMA going to keep track of how many folks actually came to LACMA specifically for LA, or
yes, we do have.
I think it'd be very curious to actually know the scale.
Yes, so we do have metrics in place. The exhibitions are still ongoing. As of now, I think we've had over at least I want to say 125,000 who have done for whoever counted attendance counting for one of our first exhibitions that opened early in the summer, which was the Home So Different, So Appealing. It's definitely across the board, especially, but going back to Universal History of Infamy, there is, the challenges of working with smaller institutions with the large institutions. You're looking at different types of turnaround. We deal with 15 curatorial departments at LACMA. We have a process that goes, we have auxiliary departments, we have publications, we have graphics, and the nature of contemporary curatorial is, just working with the artistic process, it could change at any time. And whereas more contemporary galleries are used to accommodating that kind of turnaround, it could happen at any time. When you're asking, for example, a larger institution to change graphics or add graphics closer to the end or working with publications, it does kind of it is a very big challenge. Smaller institutions also have, especially with the 18th Street Art Center, focusing on the artist residencies, their work is in process. They were given 1 to 2 months in Los Angeles. They were housed either at the 18th Street Art Center, and these artists are from abroad. Some are from Sweden or from Denmark, but also from Brazil. So they're coming from all over, and then they're studying here and researching, and then they're doing their project in their studios. So it's just also, the grants also can't accommodate everything. Even though the Getty is generous, we still are looking at, you're looking at shipping costs when the project is done, and you don't know the scale of what it's going to happen. You're also looking at other challenges. Oh, because they're finishing to the end of the deadline of the exhibition, for publications, I mean, if the photography has to be done before, you're looking at, it's a disservice when you have the publication ready, but then the show's closed, because everything is a process. Working with an elementary school, specifically with Charles White Elementary, the education department has been instrumental in fostering this partnership. It's been a 10-year process. 1 second. It's a 10-year partnership. We started in 2008. The inaugural exhibition was with Mark Bradford and Ruben Ochoa. And because of the committed success that we've had, the Charles White Elementary School has continued an extended a 10-year contract. So we're going to have a 20-year partnership with the school. They're also planning on making it a magnet school for the visual arts. So the challenge is, I mean, I'm saying one of the benefits, and it's a huge benefit, but the challenge also is the administration. So we have about, according to the education department, I think the principals change every other year. Think about having a director change every other year in a museum, and you'd have to build that new relationship even though it's 20 years long.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a lot on your plates, and I know that PST LA, you were really running around like crazy. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm very excited to see and hear more about LACMA's expansion and renovation in the coming months too. That's very exciting. So translating exhibitions between differently scaled contexts is something that you are currently working on, Professor Ankori. The Frida Kahlo exhibition, moving from her home in Casa Azul in Mexico, will feature a series of costumes, accessories, as well as her medical apparatuses. And I'm thinking, is apparatuses the correct word? Apparatus at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. So this is a relatively small exhibition in Mexico, specifically within her home, which provides a vital backdrop for the show. Your challenge as a Frida Kahlo scholar is to work to recreate the exhibition and provide a new context, whilst also exploring the freedom that comes with a venue outside of a weighted confines, such as her home, that of course comes with such a lot of context too. So how will this new part of the show honor and also change from the show within her home, and what aspects are you most looking forward to adding to this show that might not be highlighted within the home context? And I think also, before you answer that question, if you could just give a little bit of a background about her home so that we can understand exactly what it's about.
Okay, great. So first of all, I want to say that I want to go to Miami and Los Angeles right now after hearing my co-presenters. But to give the context and everything, I'm going to ask to show the PowerPoint and the visuals, if possible.
Great, we'll just make you a presenter. There we go. It's on screen.
Is it on screen? Okay.
Yes, it is.
Great. So let me just, all right. Can you see it?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, the exhibition, and this is not the title. We don't have a title yet. The Victoria and Albert Museum is very, very large, and when the title, this is just a temporary title. I'm not curating the show, and one of the big differences is that the curator who curated the Mexican iteration of the show, Circe Enestosa, is a visiting curator, guest curator of the show, along with Claire Wilcox, who is the Victorian Albert fashion curator. But thankfully, and I just feel really, really honored to have been invited to act as an advisor on content and advisor to the curators, specifically in order to provide this context that's lacking. So the original show was staged and, as I said, curated by Circe Enestosa at the Blue House, La Casa Azul, which was the house where Kahlo was born, where she lived part of her life, where she died, and which now houses the Frida Kahlo Museum. So to have her, these are some of the photographs that I took of the inside of her home, of the outside of her home. These are photographs of her working in the home, painting inside the home. And this portrait of her father is actually one that is on view at the museum. So having that context was very, very important because people came to see Frida Kahlo's home, and then they got to see her clothes. This is an installation shot from the La Casa Azul 2012 exhibition. And let me just explain that there were wardrobes and rooms and a bathroom in the Frida Kahlo Museum that had been locked since the artist's death in 1954. They were opened 50 years after her death in 2004, and very, very slowly studied by experts. This is the first time in 2012 that they were actually exhibited. And Circe Enestosa showed some of the costumes, and this is her field of expertise. She also comes from a background of her being Mexican and also being from an indigenous family. So a lot of these costumes, most of them from Tehuantepec that Frida Kahlo loved, were shown. And one part of her curatorial thesis was that Kahlo's sartorial choices were to display her ethnicity and ethnic identity. The other part of the exhibition, and again, this is the way it was shown in La Casa Azul in 2012, you see the curatorial design shows the tiles of the bathroom where these medical apparatus were found. After her amputation, so this is her, I'm blanking out on how you call this, a prosthetic limb, corsets, both of plaster, leather, etc. And the concept was that Frida Kahlo's wardrobe displays her ethnicity and hides her disability. So within that context, everything was clear. What we wanted to do was to provide the context that's lacking. First of all, we don't have Frida Kahlo's home, which actually kind of exudes some of her spirit, because you're surrounded by her things and by photographs of how she was there, etc. So what we decided, and this is where I came and I helped, was to add to the London venue photographs, drawings, a full catalog, and many of Frida Kahlo's paintings. And I'm not at liberty to kind of expose what will be in the show, which opens in June. But let me just, I can say how we expanded the thesis. So while there's still emphasis on the ethnicity and the disability, and we will be showing the costumes and the jewelry and the other accessories and the corsets, the way I see it, we will be showing how Kahlo composed and posed for photographs, and when she was creating her sartorial look. And we will actually have this drawing where she actually shows us how she is posing and composing herself. What you see are photographs. The other thing that we can discern now that we have many, many new documents, because along with the costumes and the accessories, we also have many, many more letters, documents, films, etc. We can actually trace the process that Kahlo, how she became, how she kind of composed the look of La Mexicana, the paradigmatic Mexican woman, specifically after she left Mexico and went to live in San Francisco. And she actually talks about this, how she brought the shawls, the rebosos, the huipils, which are the shirts, the jade necklaces, and how special she was, and how all the photographers wanted to photograph her. And then she added hair to this, and some of this process of how she became the iconic Frida Kahlo is what we will be showing in the exhibition. But the other part of it is that while for photographs and for dressing up, she posed and composed herself, in her art and in her drawings too, she actually exposed herself. This drawing called Appearances Can Be Deceiving was also discovered in 2004, and Circe Nestosa showed it in La Casa Azul. But now we will be showing it, and it will, we will be showing that composing herself was a deliberate act, like a work of art, but that she chose what to hide. She hid from the waist down. She always hid because of her accident and her polio earlier in childhood. The bottom part of her body is the part that she wanted to hide. But what we also want to say is that her art exposes that which she wanted to hide through her manner of dressing. So she shows both her vulnerabilities and her kind of persona. She shows both her ethnicities and her disabilities, but within a composition that poses, exposes, and proposes. And her identification with her costumes are so, becomes so extreme that she actually sometimes shows the dress and the Tijuana costume as a stand-in for herself. So just to sum up, because I know we're running out of time, we will be showing costumes such as this one, but we will show it with the painting in which she used the costume, and also with photographs of herself with the painting in various stages. This is actually an unfinished version of the painting. We will show this painting with photographs of the preparatory drawing, or how she started composing the work, and with her other views. We will also be showing the rebosos and the jewelry and the rings and her makeup, etc. So just to sum up, first of all, I feel really, really honored to be working with Circe and Claire. And I think that scholarship is sometimes lonely, and working in collaborations is very joyful. I love it. So we'll be showing the costumes, accessories, and medical corsets that were shown, but we will add the Mexican context, the Casa Azul context, the art historical contexts. We will also add photographs, drawings, paintings, film clips, documents. And there will be a fully illustrated new catalog that will bring everything into perspective.
Thank you so much for that. I'm actually going to jump to our third quick question because we're running out of time. I'm going to kind of ask it in quite a short way. I think there's a challenge there as well between making the show accessible, but also avoiding trying to tell her life story per se. Could you speak to that a little bit? Because obviously you're trying to give a lot of context, but you want to avoid kind of creating a very didactic experience that just retells her life. Can you talk a little bit about how you will handle that? Because that's
sure. And that's very, very important to me. You know, when I started working on my scholarship on Frida Kahlo and doing the research and actually writing my dissertation and publishing the books, the big and still amazing work that was done was by Hayden Herrera, her 1983 book on Frida, which was told through autobiography, the autobiographical lens of Frida Kahlo. And all through my life, and I've been trying to look at her paintings and to look at her, of course, her biography was important, her life story is important, who she was is important, because she does paint self-portraits that talk about the self. But we wanted, but you know, not defining her through this narrow autobiographical prism. So there will be sections that will be devoted to Mexican history and the costumes history. And there will be a lot of emphasis on her creative process, you know, the minute and how she used photography for that. So by providing a lot of, and you know, I think that all of us now see her way of dressing as also a work of art that was very deliberate. And so I think that we're finding a balance of not reducing her to one thing. We talked about, you know, a large institution or a large venue and putting it into a small venue. Here we have the opposite. So the Victoria and Albert Museum, as you know, is really very, very large and spacious, and there are amazing designers who are working to make this experiential, make it very, very respectful, make it about not just Frida Kahlo, but Frida Kahlo's world, and then, of course, emphasize her amazing creativity in everything she did. Did I answer that?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. That was great. Juan, before we wrap this up, I'd like to come back to you to a point. You mentioned earlier that the Rebel space is a 501c3, but I also find it very curious that although the space was privately made, but then became a 501c3 and also kind of functions as a museum space. Can you talk a little bit about that role and how you kind of see the space, you know, making shows that travel, and how you kind of cross over to becoming a museum space as well?
Sure. So yeah, so it became a 501c3 in 1993, and since then we've just been expanding our hours, our access, our engagement with Miami-Dade County Public Schools. We've always been loaning for many, many decades, and the public hours are extensive now. We'll have more programming coming in the spring. So it raises this interesting question of what is and isn't a museum, and whether institutions even want to embrace that term. You know, you see some museums calling themselves institutes or centers. we'll be moving in 2 years, and we'll be changing our name to Rebel Museum to emphasis. For me, it's I just want to emphasize the access that people have to these artworks. You know, over 7,500 works, and we'll have works from the 80s that aren't always on view here by Cindy Sherman or Katie Noland or Barbara Kruger, Kara Walker, works that some of us take for granted, but you can't always see if you step off a plane in New York or Paris, be it Marlene Dumas, Takashi Murakami, these names. And so to call ourselves a museum versus a collection, I think collections can be very static, and collections can be very very limited in their engagement with the public and the community, and we prefer the opposite. And so the word museum, I feel, you know, connotes that we are here for the public and public hours and public research library and free of charge for any student tours, etc. So that's how we've grown into that. We don't sell any mugs in our gift shop though, so I'm not sure if we can call ourselves a museum. We'll work on that.
Gannit and Juan, I think we have one final question. For those that are doing traveling exhibitions, do you have suggestions for ways to promote traveling exhibitions to potential partners?
Sure. Gannit, would you like to answer first?
Why don't you go ahead?
Great. Yeah, so for us, it's been, God, it's amazing how really we started off with very small shows, and as the relationships grew, and it was really North Carolina Museum of Art, you know, right in the middle of the financial crisis, Larry Wheeler there calling me and saying, we'd like to take this massive show of yours. And from there, having such a good working relationship with them, and them enjoying working with our registrars, preparators, etc., that it grew from there. I believe Larry spoke to some of his colleagues, and for example, the director Cameron Kitchen, who's at the Cincinnati Art Museum, we think the world of him. He spoke to a colleague at the Memphis Brooks, and they phoned me. You know, Detroit Institute, it was the same way. I mean, we talk to people. I mean, we mail catalogs, and we reach out to institutions that we feel would be a phenomenal fit, and sometimes they're not responsive. And when we feel, God, it's just made for that space, but we're not frustrated, and we just keep moving, and it just, fortunately, we've just had very good rapport. And I think all these institutions talk. So I'm sure before they call me, they call Milwaukee Art Museum, and they call Contemporary Art Center in New Orleans, and they speak, and it's worked out. But it's very organic, and I wish there was a clearer roadmap. But it's relationships and building trust.
So I would segue through the term relationships. I've moved around a lot and worked with many institutions, sometimes, you know, writing a catalog essay, sometimes just loving an artist's show and reaching out to the curator and commenting on their work. So I think relationships with other curators and museum directors, and because I deal with contemporary art, with artists who also work with other institutions. So I'm gonna quote another word that Juan used, organic. So for example, if I'm interested in an artist and follow his or her work, and another institution also does, and then we wanna have a great, a bigger, you know, to pull our resources together and either co-organize or travel a show, we do that. And I find that it's usually common interests and people you enjoy working with, and not being afraid of being rejected, because I've had, you know, I wanted to do a joint exhibition with another museum, and it didn't work out for the one that I wanted. But then 2 years down the line, they had an idea that was excellent, and we joined forces. And I think that especially a small museum like the Rose Art Museum, we have consortiums. For example, for the Northeast Museum, we purchase video art together. Or my interest in Frida Kahlo made me collaborate with other institutions like were also interested in that show. So I think just looking around, finding people who share an interest in artists or themes or certain media, you know, and not being afraid of rejection, or if it doesn't work out, that's fine.
Wonderful. I think that's a perfect note to end here. The end note being be brave. So
Yes.
thank you to everybody who joined us online. Thank you so much, Gannit, Juan, my co-conspirator, Devi, and thank you so much to the AAMC for hosting. This was a wonderful conversation. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.